Today's video, we are at the fly tying vise, and today we are going to tie a saltwater pattern that I came up with out of necessity. This is not anything fancy. It's actually kind of a trash fly. I come up with it out of necessity several years ago before I really learned how to fly fish in the coast. I went down there to had a friend that was telling me that hammerheads were coming in and that the jacks were coming in, and I was like, man, we're gonna come down there, we want to do this. So I raced down there. I got all these great big flies that I've tied, all these traditional big massive saltwater flies, and we were going to go out into the deeper waters, not the bay, and get out of the flats. So we're out there, and man, I am trying to cast these flies and I have no clue what I'm doing. If anybody would have watched and seen, it was absolutely humiliating. It looked like 13 monkeys humping a football. Absolutely just horrible. So I ended up quitting. My buddy that was down there, he had a skiff, so he takes me out on a skiff, and he's a traditional fisherman. He's not a fly fisherman. And he's chumming the water, and he's throwing these lures that kind of match the chum into the water. And I mean, these big aggressive fish are coming in just one after the other, multi-species of fish, including the sharks that we were after. And I thought, man, I can make a fly that looks like that, and I don't really have to cast it. I can throw it into the water and let it drift out there where everything else is. So I busted out my fly tying kit, because if I have my fly rod, I have a fly tying kit with me, because you never know when you get somewhere there's going to be some crazy hatch you have to match. So I bust out my fly tying kit. Well, I don't have any big saltwater hooks left, anything like that. So he gives me, basically, it's a must-add 5/0 hook, just big saltwater hook, and that's what I started with. So I'm gonna put this in the vise, which it is a massive hook, and that is the basis of what this fly is. My vise will even take that big old fly. All right, so I've got my hook in the vise, and basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a couple materials. We're gonna have red marabou, red thread, and I'm gonna use some flash. You can use tinsel. I've used Christmas tinsel on some of these at times, just out of necessity. Something to throw some spark into it. So basically all we're going to do is we're going to wrap a bunch of thread, build the base. And these are going to get tore up no matter what you do, because most of the fish that we're messing with on these are toothy fish. So, you know, they have all these teeth that are going to just tear up everything you have. So I don't worry how well it appears. It's just kind of got to work. So what I do is I start out and I take a full piece of marabou. I'm going to cut the big part of the stem off, but I want this to reach out past that hook as far as it can. I'm going to tie that piece in. Tie it in pretty decent. And basically all we're going to do is simulate a piece of fish meat, because when they go out there and get these fish, they're literally just cutting fish up, so it's bloody, fleshy meat, and most of it's red and silver. So take another piece of marabou and tie it on. I want it to go out more than just how you would traditionally tie a marabou feather on. I'm wanting to just make a big hunk of meat. Again, I'm gonna just take and cut the bigger part of the stem on, but I leave most of the stem, because I'm trying to get this thing to really barrel out to where it's just a whole bunch of feather. I want it to look like a big old piece of meat. And each one, we start pointing them a little bit up in the air as we get towards the front with a smaller marabou feather. And this is ugly, it's trashy, it's not a great looking fly, but what I'm trying to do is come up with mass. So we are tying just as much bulk into the pattern, because once it gets wet it streams down a little bit, so keeping the center of the feather in keeps it from doing that too much. It'll keep it flowing around. So I'm going to take a piece here and I'm going to put it on the side. Cut, tip off that feather, tie one on the other side. You can see it's just getting a big bulk, just a big bulky mess of red. And then as we get towards the front of it, I'm going to cut and just leave the tips of the tail on. Again, I leave the center of the feather in on every one that I tie because it builds more mass, more movement. And this is not something that's needing to look pretty, it's something that needs to be effective. It will eat up your marabou, which I don't necessarily use great marabou for this one. It's just some plain Jane marabou. It's not UV or anything like that. I'm just building up a big red mass so it looks like a hunk of meat. When I get to the front, I'm going to tie that in pretty good. And like I say, this thing is all but impossible to cast. What we're doing is when we get on a skiff, we're just going to throw it to the back of the boat as the boat's moving and let it drift into that chum. And the fish come into that chum. And if you've never fished by chum, it is amazing. I have, on accident, fished on chum, plus I've had a few times where I've actually done it on intentionally when I wasn't fly fishing. But we were out by Key West and we had rented a boat one time, and I got sick, bad sick. I got motion sickness, and it was kind of an odd deal, and I threw up all over the side of the boat. And I had the best fishing experience I had ever had in my life on that trip. Everything was coming into where I had thrown up and was hitting on every fly we threw them. So I learned real quick that chumming, it works. And a lot of guys are above this. I kind of would rather go out and throw flies now that I can. But when you can't, or you don't have the opportunity, or the conditions aren't real good, I tell you, this is going to work out amazing. There is no rhyme or reason. This doesn't have to be real pretty, but I just kind of try to keep the tinsel just kind of, and this is like a rainbow silver tinsel. And all that's going to do is the skin of a fish, if you're out there, it's going to have some reflectability to it in silver that they're going to see. So I just think that kind of works out a little bit in your favor. And like I say, I don't waste a whole lot of time making these things because they are going to get tore up. But I promise you, this is effective. I have caught a lot of big aggressive predator fish in saltwater with this. And for the head cement, I just use, I think it's super dry. Get it at Walmart, dollar stores, wherever like that. But you can see this is a big, massive hunk that will look like a hunk of meat when it gets wet. And by tying it with the stems of the feathers in there, it won't clump down like normal marabou does. So if you keep it all up like that, it stays big and massive as meat. And this is the go-to fly if you want to get out there and you're not a great caster. You can throw this thing off the back of a boat, off the back of a skiff, anywhere. Just cut up chum where it's legal and throw that out there, and then just cast this fella right into that chum and just kind of work it with the action, and they will go nuts for it. So I appreciate you guys watching. Anybody that's wanting to go out there that kind of struggles with casting or just wants to try something different, this is the greatest fly you can use when fishing with chum. I've tried it over and over again, come across it on accident, and I'm sure somebody's come up with something similar, but this is something I tied because it's stuff I had in my tying kit at the time. So anyhow, appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoyed watching and hope it'll help you guys.